So what we're finding, the RegTech trend for 2022 is that organizations are trying to get more control over not just where personally identifiable information is in their data, it sits across their organization, but they're actually trying to get the key stakeholders from a compliance, privacy, and security perspective to really get on the same page to ensure that this data that has high degrees of business value can actually be utilized across the organization. The compliance officer is looking at how do regulations impact this. The privacy officer is trying to understand, according to the policy that's been written for the organization, how can they enable the business to do more under that policy? And then security is always asking the question, if I give data and make it accessible, how is it going to be used and will be kept secure? So we're really seeing that those three entities are coming together to try to get more clarity on how to unlock data for organizations. I think it's due to the fact that there's so much regulation coming out that the ability for, again, these three entities to actually remain on the same page is an operational imperative, because the default response where there's lack of clarity is no. And ultimately, if you're trying to actually get access to more data and the default response is no, you actually hinder the business's ability to move forward, you hinder innovation, and oftentimes you hinder revenue opportunities. So I do think it's clarity amongst these three stakeholders, because there's a fourth stakeholder known as the chief data officer of the data and analytics organization that is really looking, their mandate is to allow data to be used to drive business value. So what we're seeing is that because these organizations are now at the table together, and there's the ability by which organizations can now develop a governance framework that ensures that every time data is being used, even if it's sensitive in nature, is done according to the security policy, is done in a compliant fashion, and the privacy officer knows that all of the data is going to be kept private. So it's, from our perspective, this is the trend that is going to drive a lot of innovation for organizations. According to Gartner, I think they say 97% of a company's data is not used. So what if you could unlock 50, 70% of that unused data, but do so in a way that satisfies those three entities? You have a huge business opportunity that you can make available to the company. We've had conversations with those type of entities here where they've sat down with us. We've had the opportunity to explain the fact that ultimately they are on the same side of the equation, asking the same question in different ways. And just the facility by which they can begin to realize that there's technologies like that which Duality provides that can enable them to do things that satisfy those requirements. That's one of the big benefits for us. I think that ultimately it is this, the biggest challenge right now is this increasingly complex compliance landscape that, from our perspective, what we're finding is that forums like this facilitate the means by which you can actually just have a dialogue with organizations that actually are doing these types of activities that provides greater knowledge transfer. And to me, it's the lack of knowledge transfer that is existing relative to compliance changes that are occurring that is probably the biggest challenge. So if we're able to combine, these three organizations, provide them the means by which they can communicate, I would anticipate that the benefits not only to the RegTech industry, but honestly to humanity, because now data sets that previously could never be combined, you actually can begin to do something that's relatively meaningful. An example is, what if I were to take genomic data and clinical data and combine them? Right? Today you can't combine them because they contain very sensitive information, but by doing so in a privacy protected way, you actually can identify where you may actually have a genetic predisposition to a rare form of cancer that could actually get ahead of, for the individual, get ahead of the mere fact that this cancer will be treated before it ever manifests itself.